Welcome to FA Cup Files, ESTD 1871, where football's oldest trophy tells its greatest stories. Step into history with FA Cup Files, a tribute to grit, glory, and the birth of the beautiful game. Since 1871, legends have been made. FA Cup Files brings you the stories time tried to forget.
It's the competition that began by drawing together the elite of Victorian society and those from its humblest strata, and one which still, despite the league pyramid that followed, is the only way in which a team of postmen, office clerks and production line workers might get the chance of walking out at Old Trafford, Anfield or Stamford Bridge. The FA Cup. All human life is here. Following the formation of the Football Association in 1863 and the early work done in codifying the game by producing its first set of laws, it was that vision of bringing the nation's teams together, the public schools of the South and the teams forged from industry, church and philanthropy in the North, that formed the FA's next guiding task, one ideally suited to a competitive arena. The burgeoning game was still in its infancy as we entered the 1870s, teams playing in a patchwork of local friendlies for the most part, few venturing beyond the most parochial of boundaries to play games. As the National Association, it was incumbent upon the FA to show leadership and draw all these disparate clubs into a cohesive whole, and a countrywide competition seemed the best method of doing so. Charles W. Alcock, the secretary of the FA, had already been a prime mover in trying to get international football off the ground by arranging a controversial first meeting between England and Scotland in 1870. The FA Cup final between Aston Villa and Everton at Crystal Palace. Clearly a forward thinker, on the 20th of July, 1871, at a meeting of the FA Committee at the offices of the Sportsman newspaper, he drew on memories of his school days and the inter-house matches at Harrow, concluding that with the growth of the railways in particular making national travel possible, there was now no longer any impediment to teams from all over the nation meeting one another on the sporting field. So it was that at that committee meeting, Alcock proposed that it is desirable that a Challenge Cup should be established in connection with the association, for which all clubs belonging to the association should be invited to compete. The motion was swiftly carried, the rules of the knockout competition agreed and invitations issued to the FA's 50-member clubs of the time, just 15 of whom responded. Alcock was clearly ahead of his time. Following further withdrawals, around a dozen clubs ultimately took part over a competition that spanned just 13 fixtures, the first round of games taking place on the 11th of November, 1871. The competition culminated in a final at Kennington Oval on the 16th of March, 1872, the Royal Engineers taking on Wanderers FC, a side drawn largely from old boys of the public schools, notably Harrow, and including one Charles W. Alcock in their side. It was fitting that the man who did so much to bring the Challenge Cup into being was on the winning side and became one of the first to lift it. The cup was actually presented almost a month later at Wanderers' annual dinner at the Pall Mall restaurant, the FA issuing each player with a silk badge to commemorate the victory, the club presenting each player with a gold medal. The only known medal still in existence was bought by the PFA at auction in 2010 for £70,500. Year in which that rule applied. They retained the trophy with a 2-0 win over Oxford University, going on to win 5 of the first 7 finals, Oxford University and Royal Engineers winning the other 2. But as Wanderers were busily underlining the fact that the cup had been born from the great amateur bastions of the nation, the spread of the FA's influence via its county and district satellites would spawn the next great change in the game, the arrival of professionalism, legalized in 1885. By that time, the provinces had started to show their mettle, Blackburn Olympic carrying off the trophy in 1883 before Blackburn Rovers began the roll call of winners familiar to us today, winning a hat-trick of cups before triumphs for the likes of Aston Villa, West Bromwich Albion and Preston North End. By the mid-1880s, winning the FA Cup had already become the holy grail for the rapidly organising football clubs, and they weren't shy of spending the money required to do it, Rovers forking out some £615 on wages in the cup-winning season of 1885-86. Professionalism contributed to a shift in the game's axis, the new clubs of the North with their players dedicated to the game quickly usurping the amateur sides typically from the South. That led to the creation of the Football League in 1888, but it was still the FA Cup final that was the showpiece occasion of the season, even after it moved to the Crystal Palace in 1895, the year in which the original trophy was stolen from a Birmingham shop window, displayed there after Aston Villa had won it. A replica was made to replace it, and that survived until 1910, when it was replaced by the trophy that we know today. Bradford City players line up for the presentation of the FA Cup by C. Crump, 1911. By then, the cup was not only the most desirable piece of silverware in the English, and perhaps the world game, but the competition was a byword for the unexpected, the heroic, the romantic. The idea of the magic of the cup had taken hold in popular culture, the concept of giant killing central to it all. Notts County became the first winners from the second division in 1894, beating Bolton of the top flight, while Tottenham won the competition as a Southern League outfit in 1901, the first final to be filmed by Payth News, defeating Sheffield United in a replay. The competition's hold on the national consciousness took another great leap forward in 1923 when the final was hosted by the Empire Stadium at Wembley, a purpose-built stadium, designed, in part, to accommodate the growing appetite for attending the FA Cup final. Completed only 4 days before Bolton Wanderers were to play West Ham United in the final, demand for entrance overwhelmed even this new cathedral of football, as Pele would later call it. With an announced crowd of 126,047, although many believe that perhaps more than twice that many might have been inside the stadium, spectators spilled onto the field, eventually only cleared by the intervention of mounted police and, in particular, George Scory and his horse, Billy, gradually eased them back into the surrounds, to allow the game to go ahead. The White Horse final remains one of the most iconic moments in world sporting history. Wembley and the FA Cup final went hand in hand thereafter, each adding to the other's lustre. Cardiff City became the first, and so far, only, club to take the cup out of England when they defeated Arsenal in 1927, the first final to be transmitted live on national radio. Television arrived in 1938, broadcasting the Preston vs Huddersfield final in full, though there had already been limited coverage of the previous year's final between Sunderland and Preston. But it wasn't all happening at the National Stadium. The 1933 FA Cup tie between Walsall and Arsenal, the archetypal giant-killing feat as the Gunners, well on the way to the first of their hat-trick of First Division wins, were humbled by the Saddlers of the Third Division, North, manager Herbert Chapman so angry that he sacked one of his defenders on the train home from Fellows Park. When football returned after the war, the appetite for the game was greater yet, and the FA Cup duly stepped up to the plate. 1949 saw another huge upset as Yeovil of the Southern League defeated big spending Sunderland, the Bank of England club as they were known, in the fourth round. Even so, it was the final that really caught the imagination, and in 1953, with the nation newly equipping itself with grainy black and white sets to watch the Queen's coronation, came the game with everything. The nation's favourite footballer, Stanley Matthews, seemed to be nearing the end of his career at 38 and still had never won an FA Cup winners' medal. This appeared to be his last chance, but Bolton had other ideas and, with just over 20 minutes to go, they led 3-1. Matthews conjured up a cross 4 to reduce the deficit, but as the game entered its final minute, Bolton were still in front, only for Mortensen to score direct from a free kick. Impossibly, Matthews then conjured up the fairy-tale finish, the wizard of the dribble crossing for Perry to score the winner in injury time. That began a run of extraordinary finals, former prisoner of war Bert Trautmann playing on to win with Manchester City in 1956 despite a broken neck, Manchester United dragging themselves from the wreckage of Munich to contest an emotionally exhausting final in 58, Spurs completing the 20th century's first double in 61. Year after year, the FA Cup final threw up indelible memories that will last as long as the game is played, a delirious Everton fan invading the pitch and slipping off his jacket to avoid the attentions of a policeman in 66, the conflict of 1970 as Chelsea and Leeds declared war on each other over 2 games, Charlie George slumping to the ground, overcome as he sealed Arsenal's a double in 1971. And yet there was more to come. That began a run of extraordinary finals, former prisoner of war Bert Trautmann playing on to win with Manchester City in 1956 despite a broken neck, Manchester United dragging themselves from the wreckage of Munich to contest an emotionally exhausting final in 58, Spurs completing the 20th century's first double in 61. Year after year, the FA Cup final threw up indelible memories that will last as long as the game is played, a delirious Everton fan invading the pitch and slipping off his jacket to avoid the attentions of a policeman in 66, the conflict of 1970 as Chelsea and Leeds declared war on each other over 2 games, Charlie George slumping to the ground, overcome as he sealed Arsenal's a double in 1971. And yet there was more to come.
Thanks for tuning into FA Cup Files, where every cup run holds a tale, and we're here to tell them all. From first whistles to last-minute winners, FA Cup Files will be here, uncovering football's finest. Subscribe and stay with us on FA Cup Files, where the magic never fades, and the legends live on.